Hello everyone, I'm Minoxen and this is episode 5 of my War Thunder Spotlight series. This episode will discuss the Pz.Kpfw Churchill Mark III. It's a premium 4.0 battle rating tier 2 tank in the German research tree, which is identical to the British tree's Churchill Mark III. To review this tank, we'll use the holy trinity of tank design: armor, firepower, and mobility. We'll start with armor. The armor on this tank is very good for its battle rating and tier. The frontal hull armor is 89mm thick, and so is the mantlet. With proper angling, your armor jumps to over 120mm thick. The sides are respectable 63mm, and while it can protect from some cannons, its real strength is when angled. Your angled sides range from 126 to almost 200mm of effective armor, making you a tough kill for all but the strongest allied guns. The turret's sides and rear are 76mm thick, with the rear hull dropping to 51mm. For weaknesses, the hull-mounted machine gun is likely the most significant, but unless hit just right, they may actually impact the double thickness of armor in the center. Another weakness to keep in mind is your flat mantlet armor. When you're between shots, turn your turret's face away from the enemy so you can either ricochet or stop a lot of enemy rounds. And lastly, your turret ring's relatively thin armor is flat when aimed at the center, which is hard to hit at long range, but most of my angled deaths happen from here. I'd definitely suggest investing in some camo, as it goes a long way in concealing those weak points with a few bushes. This tank's very survivable when competing in the 3.0 to 4.3 battle rating, and its gun can also compete in that tier. So let's talk about that now, in the firepower section. This Churchill features the British 57mm 6-pounder cannon. It's capable of -12 degrees of depression and up to 20 degrees of elevation. The turret rotation is fast at 24 degrees per second, which helps with firing and then angling your mantlet. Its reload speed is actually fairly quick at 4 seconds, which helps in picking off enemy crew with your non-explosive shells. And speaking of shells, as a captured British tank, it features the standard British 6-pounder types of ammo. You'll generally only use the Shot Mark 9 for its superior penetration and less chance of ricochet, but you may want some high explosive rounds for the occasional anti-air vehicle. It can hold up to 85 rounds of ammunition, but you'll want to reduce that to eliminate some of its 5 racks. Interestingly, this is one of the few vehicles that the ammo racks are correctly displayed numerically, and I'd suggest cutting your load down to 43, eliminating the middle rack and left racks. For my recommendation, I'd suggest taking 40 rounds of Shot Mark 9 and 3 high explosive rounds. Its 6-pounder can handle most anything that it can run into, but it will struggle against other heavy tanks. Your mobility can be a bit of a struggle, but for a heavy tank, it actually feels fairly good. Unlike a lot of tank stat cards, the listed 25 km/h is easy to reach in a short distance. While this speed is lower than other tanks in the tier, it feels okay for this tank. But like most all British tanks, its reverse is a horrible 2 km/h. Similar to later model Churchills, this tank uses its differential steer to change its heading at a fairly slow 8 degrees per second in a neutral turn. Turning from forward movement gets you about 7 degrees per second, and reverse is about the same as neutral, so most times you're better off at coming to a stop and then turning to a new heading rather than attempting it in movement. The Churchill's legendary climbing abilities are intact, and while it does bring you to an absolute crawl of 2 km/h, you can scale pretty significant hills, but you will slip if you try to turn while you're climbing. To wrap up the Trinity, I'll grade this tank's armor is very effective at its battle rating. Just remember to angle yourself. Its firepower is also good with a very mobile turret, quick reload, and solid penetration. Mobility is this tank's weakest area, but even with that, I'd say that it's a relatively average rather than just bad. With the Trinity done, I'll make some suggestions for a good 4.0 German lineup. For mobility, I usually bring the premium Panzer IIH, or if you want, the Puma can be an effective free vehicle to get similar speed from. There are 2 4.0 tank destroyers, the Stug and the Flak 88mm half-track. I generally prefer the 88mm for its more deadly gun, though it does have lower survivability. Medium tanks are limited, and I wouldn't recommend the Panzer IV-J, but the Panzer IV-G is probably your best bet unless you want to invest in the premium T-34, which is my preferred medium. Anti-air is a very easy pick with the quad 20mm Whirlwind, emptying the air from the ground. For ground pounding, either of the HS-129 Ducks can do some serious work, but to take full advantage of the battle rating, I bring the ME-410 with its 50mm cannon and other decent armaments. For air superiority, the captured Russian LA would be nice, but that's an extremium premium price tag, so it's a bit prohibitive. I usually bring a Bf-109 for my preferred style of fighting. And with your lineup detailed, I'll give you some gameplay tips for the Pz.Kpfw Churchill. As usual, I recommend you check the battle rating of your match before bringing the Churchill. Its armor is very good when against 3.0 to 4.3 battle rated tanks with a few exclusions, But at 4.7 to 5.0, you will run into a lot more allied guns that can penetrate even your sloped armor. And speaking of sloped armor, remember to angle your Churchill so that the majority of the fire is at a 45-degree angle from your front, so you can get an effective 100 to 300 millimeters of armor. Like any heavy tank, know your surroundings and try to avoid being flanked, since your mobility won't let you survive a surprise flank. As I mentioned earlier, fire and then look away from your target unless you know that they cannot return fire. Your mantlet's flat plate is an easy penetration for a lot of enemy tanks if you give it to them. If you're going to position near a capture point to try and defend it, make sure that you're actually on the zone so your repairs will go faster than usual, because trust me, you will be tracked a lot in this tank. Also, while your reverse is poor for retreat, you can use it and still fire somewhat accurately. While it doesn't get you off the battlefield, it does alter your enemy's aim slightly between their shots. While this is an exact copy of the British Mark III Churchill, keep in mind that in realistic battles you won't be facing nearly as many powerful guns at this tier for the Axis. So don't let a poor experience as the British Churchill ruin this German premium for you. Well, that's it, and I hope this helped. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below with your suggestions and thoughts. Also, come visit me on Twitch and Twitter. If you enjoyed this and would like to see more, check the description or annotation for a link to my Tank Spotlight playlist. War Thunder is free to play, and if you want to try it out, please use my referral link in the description to support the channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time.